The office smelled of polished wood and ambition, a sterile perfume that clung to the air like a lie. I stood in the doorway of Jacob's corner office, my old laptop bag slung over my shoulder, its frayed strap digging into my skin. The Seattle skyline loomed beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, gray and unyielding, as if the city itself knew what was coming. Jacob sat behind his mahogany desk, our desk once a shared dream we'd scavenged from an estate sale, laughing about how we'd earn it someday. His smile was sharp. Practice the kind of smile that could close $1 million deal or break a heart without flinching. "Congratulations, Brenda," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "You're terminated. Effective immediately." He slid a manila envelope across the desk, its edges crisp, as if it had been waiting for this moment. "Take your old laptop and get out. This company, 8 million and counting, is mine now. Melissa will step into your role. Oh, and the divorce papers, they'll be at the house tomorrow." Melissa stood beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder with a possessiveness that made my stomach churn. Her red dress screamed power, but her eyes betrayed something else, nervousness perhaps, or the faintest flicker of guilt. I met her gaze, then Jacob's, and felt the weight of 8 years collapse into this single moment. 8 years of code coffee-stained napkins and promises whispered in the dark. 8 years now, reduced to this theatrical execution. I didn't flinch. I didn't scream or beg. Instead, I smiled, a small, knowing curve of my lips that made Jacob's brow twitch. He didn't know about the timer ticking silently on my phone hidden in my pocket. 10 minutes. That's all they had before the world they'd stolen began to crumble. My fingers tightened around the laptop bag, the one Jacob thought was a sentimental relic. He had no idea it was a weapon loaded with secrets I'd buried deep in the company's digital veins. "Security will escort you out," Jacob added, leaning back in his chair, his wedding ring catching the morning light. "Standard procedure." I nodded, still smiling. "Of course." My voice was calm, almost too calm, like the quiet before a storm. Gary from HR hovered in the corner clutching a folder, as if it could shield him from the tension. He looked like he wanted to disappear, and I couldn't blame him. This wasn't just a termination. It was a performance scripted and rehearsed with me as the unwitting villain in their story. As I turned to leave, my phone vibrated against my thigh. The timer I'd set 6 months ago had just activated. 10 minutes until the code I'd woven into NextCore's core systems would wake up. 10 minutes until their empire built on my algorithms. My sleepless nights, my soul would face the consequences of their betrayal. I didn't look back as I stepped into the hallway where 2 security guards waited, their faces familiar, but their eyes averted. Tony and Marcus, men I'd greeted every morning for 3 years, now tasked with marching me out like a thief. The elevator doors closed behind us, and the hum of the descent felt like a heartbeat slowing down. I glanced at my watch, Jacob's gift from our 5th anniversary, its ticking a reminder of promises long broken. 9 minutes left. The guards said nothing, their silence heavy with discomfort. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't feel the pulse of something vast and inevitable stirring beneath the surface. Let me take you back to how it began, not this moment, but the one that set this betrayal in motion. 6 months ago, I wasn't the woman standing here clutching a laptop bag like a lifeline. I was Brenda Martinez, co-founder and CTO of NextCore Solutions, a cybersecurity startup that had grown from a dream scribbled on grocery receipts to an $8 million empire. Jacob and I were partners equals, or so I thought. We'd built NextCore from a cramped Seattle apartment, fueled by cheap pizza and cheaper coffee, our fingers stained with ink and ambition. I was the architect, the one who turned Jacob's wild ideas into reality. He'd pace behind me, throwing out concepts faster than I could code them. What if we could predict breaches before they happen? He'd said one rainy night, his eyes alight with possibility. I'd pushed my glasses up my nose and grinned. Give me 3 months and I'll make it happen. And I did. Line by line, I built a platform that could see the future of cyber attacks, a digital oracle that made us legends in the tech world. We were unstoppable then, or so it seemed. Our wedding was a quiet affair, at the courthouse, squeezed between product launches, my $200 dress a testament to our shared sacrifice. Jacob had held my hands and whispered, "We're partners, Brenda. 50-50 in business and in life." I believed him. I believed every word, every kiss, every late-night debugging session when we'd laugh over bugs in the code and in each other. But empires built on trust are fragile, and cracks form quietly. It started with small things, Jacob interrupting me in meetings explaining my work as if I couldn't. "What Brenda means is," he'd say, his tone patronizing, as if my technical jargon needed translation. Then came the client presentations, where I'd prepare for days, only to sit silently while he took the stage, my breakthroughs reduced to bullet points on his slides. Brenda's our technical genius. He'd tell clients, his smile implying I was a cog in his machine, not the engine itself. And then there was Melissa. She arrived like a storm disguised as a breeze, her MBA from the University of Washington gleaming like a badge. I'd been relieved at first, another woman in our male-dominated office, someone who seemed to understand the chaos of our growth. She reorganized our systems, brought cookies to meetings, remembered birthdays. I thought she was an ally. I was wrong. The late nights started innocently enough. Jacob and Melissa working on urgent projects while I was sent home to an empty house. I'd wake to the sound of him slipping into bed at 3 a.m., the faint scent of her perfume clinging to him. You're imagining things he'd say when I dared to ask, his voice dripping with dismissal. "You're paranoid, Brenda." And I began to doubt myself, to wonder if the stress of scaling Next Core was warping my instincts. But 6 months ago, something shifted. I found the truth in Melissa's open laptop left carelessly on Jacob's desk. Emails that weren't just about work plans for a weekend at a cabin, plans to restructure the company without me, plans to paint me as unstable. Once Brenda's out, one email read, "We can take full control." My hands trembled as I photographed each damning word, my heart pounding not with rage, but with clarity. They thought they could erase me. They didn't know I'd already begun to fight back. I'd spent those 6 months preparing, weaving a secret into NextCore's systems, a code so subtle, so elegant, it was invisible to everyone but me. It wasn't destruction, it was revelation, a way to expose the vulnerabilities they'd ignored while plotting against me. I documented everything, backed up my contributions, consulted a lawyer in secret. I played the role of the trusting wife, the dedicated CTO, while building a trap they'd never see coming. Now, as the elevator reached the lobby, I felt the weight of those 6 months settle into resolve. The guards flanked me as we crossed the open-plan office, past desks where developers glanced up, their expressions a mix of confusion and pity. Sarah, my lead developer, half rose from her chair, her eyes wide with questions she couldn't ask. I shook my head slightly, a silent promise that this wasn't the end. The glass doors loomed ahead, the ones I'd chosen for their symbolism of transparency. Irony, it seemed, was my constant companion. My phone buzzed again, 8 minutes left. Outside, the January air was sharp, slicing through my charcoal suit, the one I'd worn to our first investor pitch. I turned back once, catching a glimpse of the building that held my life's work, its sleek facade hiding the chaos about to unfold. I walked to my car, the laptop bag heavy in my hand, its contents a ticking bomb. I didn't need to check my phone to know the timer was counting down. 7 minutes. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cold against my skin, and placed the bag carefully beside me. The parking garage was quiet, save for the distant echo of a car door slamming. Normalcy, for now. But normalcy was an illusion, and illusions were about to shatter. Jacob thought he'd won, that he'd rewritten our story with Melissa as his co-star. He didn't know I'd been writing my own script one, where the underestimated become the unstoppable. 6 minutes. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the anticipation hum through me like a current. The empire he'd stolen was about to learn its true architect and its true destroyer. The rain tapped against the window of our cramped Seattle apartment, a relentless rhythm that matched the clatter of my keyboard. It was 3 years ago, in a space barely big enough for dreams, where NextCore Solutions was born. Pizza boxes littered the floor, their grease stains mingling with scribbled notes on grocery receipts and old envelopes. Jacob paced behind me, his shadow flickering across the walls in the dim glow of a single lamp. His voice was electric, sparking ideas faster than I could capture them. "What if we could see the future?" he said, stopping mid-stride, his eyes alight with that reckless ambition I'd fallen in love with. Not just stop cyber attacks, but predict them. Know they're coming before they even start. I pushed my glasses up my nose, my fingers hovering over the laptop. The screen glowed with half-finished code, a puzzle I was piecing together line by line. "That's not impossible," I said, my voice steady, despite the exhaustion tugging at my edges. "Give me 3 months, and I'll build something the world's never seen." He grinned, that boyish, unguarded smile that made me believe we could conquer anything. He dropped to his knees beside me, his hand warm on my shoulder. "This is why I love you, Brenda. You make the impossible real." Then he kissed me right there among the chaos of our makeshift office, his lips tasting of coffee and conviction. In that moment, we were unstoppable, a pair of dreamers, with nothing but code and courage to our names. Those early days were magic, raw, and unpolished. We worked 18-hour stretches, surviving on convenience store sandwiches and sheer will. I lived in the code, my fingers weaving algorithms that could peer into the digital future, spotting patterns no one else could see. Jacob was the voice, the charmer, the one who could sell ice to a glacier. He found investors, sweet-talked clients, and kept the books balanced while I built the platform that would become NextCore's heart. We were a perfect balance, or so. I thought, a yin and yang of ambition and execution. Our wedding came in the thick of it all, a stolen Tuesday afternoon at the courthouse. My dress was a simple white number I'd ordered online for $200, the only extravagance we could afford. Jacob held my hands under the fluorescent lights, his vows more than words. "We're partners, Brenda." He whispered, his voice just for me. 50-50 in business and in life. Your dreams are mine." I believed him, my heart swelling with a certainty that felt eternal. The ring on my finger was a promise not just of love, but of a shared empire we'd build together. NextCore grew faster than either of us expected. Within 18 months, we traded our apartment for a converted warehouse with exposed pipes and concrete floors. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. We hired our first employees, Sarah, a brilliant developer with a knack for catching my bugs, Marcus, a database architect who spoke in queries as fluently as I spoke in code. We signed our first $1 million contract deal that felt like validation of every sleepless night. NextCore Solutions wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real, a living, breathing entity powered by my algorithms and Jacob's vision. But even in those triumphant days, there were shadows I didn't see, or chose not to. They were subtle at first, like whispers in the code errors, too small to notice until they cascaded. During our Monday morning stand-ups, Jacob began interrupting me when I explained technical updates. "What Brenda means is," he'd say, his voice smooth, simplifying my work into buzzwords for the team. I'd frown, but he'd laugh it off later, his hand brushing mine. "I'm just helping honey. You get lost in the details sometimes. I let it slide, chalking it up to his need to translate tech for non-tech minds. But the interruptions grew frequent, his tone sharper, as if my expertise was a liability rather than the foundation of our success. Then came the client presentations. I'd spend days crafting demos, my code dancing on the screen, to show how we could predict breaches with uncanny precision. Yet, when the time came, Jacob would take the stage, his charisma eclipsing my work. I'd sit beside him, silent, a prop in his performance. Brenda's our technical genius, he'd say to clients, his smile. Patronizing, making the magic happen behind the scenes. Behind the scenes. That phrase began to haunt me, a subtle relegation that I didn't question at first. I was too busy coding, debugging, refining the platform that was saving companies from invisible threats. But Jacob's words were planting seeds, ones I wouldn't see sprout until it was almost too late. He started leaving me out of key meetings, saying they were business-focused or too high-level for my technical mind. I'd nod, trusting him, believing we were still partners. I didn't notice how the balance was shifting, how the dream we'd built together was becoming his alone. There was one night, though, that lingers in my memory like a glitch in the system. It was late, maybe 2 a.m., and we were still in the warehouse, the rain outside a constant companion. I just finished a breakthrough, a predictive algorithm that could detect attack patterns before they even formed. My screen glowed with the results, a beautiful tapestry of data that felt like art. I called Jacob over my voice, trembling with excitement. "Look at this. It's working. It's seeing the future." He leaned over my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. For a moment, it was like the early days, just us against the world. "You're a sorceress, Brenda," he said, his voice soft with awe. "This is going to change everything." But then he straightened his expression, shifting as if a curtain had fallen. "Let's keep this quiet for now," he said, his tone oddly guarded. "We don't want to oversell it to the team until it's perfect." I frowned, confused. "Why not? This is what we've been working toward." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Trust me. Timing matters. We'll reveal it when it's ready." I nodded, pushing down the unease that flickered in my chest. I didn't know then that he was already rewriting the story, preparing to claim my magic as his own. That moment was the first crack, though I wouldn't recognize it until later. Jacob began to distance himself, not physically, but emotionally. His warmth replaced by a calculated efficiency. He'd stay late at the office, claiming he was working on investor pitches or financial projections. I'd drive home alone to our new suburban house, a modest 3-bedroom we'd bought with our first big contract. I'd heat up leftovers, the hum of the microwave drowning out the silence of an empty home. When Jacob finally slipped into bed hours past midnight, I'd pretend to be asleep, afraid to ask where he'd been, afraid of the answers I might find. I started noticing other things, too small, inexplicable details that felt like bugs in the code of our marriage. His phone always face down, now buzzing with messages he'd check when he thought I wasn't looking. A new cologne I hadn't bought, its scent lingering on his shirts. The way he'd pause before answering simple questions, as if choosing his words with care. I told myself it was stress, the weight of growing a company. But deep down in that quiet place where truths hide, I knew something was wrong. I buried myself in my work, letting the code be my refuge. Each line I wrote was a spell, a way to control the chaos threatening to spill over. I built backdoors into the platform not to harm it, but to mark it as mine, invisible signatures that only I could see. They were my insurance, a whisper of power I didn't yet know I'd need. At night, while Jacob slept, I'd sit at my desk, the glow of my laptop casting shadows across the room. I wasn't just coding. I was weaving a safety net, a way to protect what I'd built if the world I trusted collapsed. The warehouse became our kingdom, but it was a fragile one. We hired more staff, filling the space with voices and energy. Sarah and I would debug late into the night, laughing over shared frustrations. Marcus would sketch database schemas on whiteboards, his ideas sparking mine. But even as the team grew, I felt a distance forming a subtle shift in how people looked at me. Conversations would pause when I entered the break room, smiles turning guarded. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was projecting my insecurities onto a team that respected me. But then, there was the board meeting. I wasn't invited to a quiet mission that felt like a blade. Jacob had stopped by my office that morning with coffee, his smile too bright. "Change of plans," he said, setting the cup on my desk. "The board wants to focus on financials today. No need for you to sit through that." I'd protested confused technical updates were my domain, my breakthroughs. The reason investors believed in us. But he waved me off. "It's just numbers, Brenda. I'll handle it." I spent that afternoon alone in my office, watching the clock, a strange unease settling in my bones. When Jacob returned, he was vague, dismissive. "Went great," he said, not meeting my eyes. "They're happy with our direction." But I caught the flicker of something in his expression, guilt, perhaps, or the thrill of a secret kept. It was the first time I wondered if our partnership was a lie, if the man I'd built an empire with was already planning to rewrite me out of it. Looking back, I see the signs I missed, the moments when Jacob's ambition outgrew our shared vision, when his need for control began to eclipse my contributions. But back then, I was too busy building, too busy believing in us. I didn't see the storm gathering, didn't hear the whispers of betrayal in the rain. I didn't know that the platform I was creating, the one that could see the future, would one day be my weapon against the man I loved. As I sat in my car, now the laptop bag beside me, the timer on my phone counting down to 6 minutes, I thought of those early days. The memory was a bittersweet ache, a reminder of what we'd been before greed and betrayal tore us apart. Jacob thought he'd won, that he could erase me from the story we'd written together. But he'd forgotten one thing. I was the one who'd built the foundation, the one who knew every line, every secret, every vulnerability. And in 6 minutes, he'd learn what happens when you betray the architect of your empire. The air in the warehouse office had changed, though I couldn't pinpoint when. It was as if the concrete floors had absorbed a new kind of silence, one that swallowed laughter and replaced it with guarded glances. I stood at my whiteboard, sketching a new algorithm to optimize our predictive threat detection, the marker squeaking against the surface. The team buzzed around me, coders tapping at keyboards, sales reps murmuring into headsets. But I felt a strange disconnect, like a signal dropping in and out. It was subtle, insidious, like a bug buried deep in the code, invisible, until it crashed the system. That's when Melissa Rodriguez walked into NextCore Solutions. She arrived on a Monday morning, her heels clicking with purpose across the concrete, her smile as polished as her resume. An MBA from the University of Washington, 5 years at Microsoft references that glowed like polished silver. I watched her from my office, a glass-walled cube that felt more like a cage these days. She moved through the open-plan space with an ease that disarmed everyone, shaking hands, offering compliments. Her laugh, a melody that seemed to charm even the most cynical developers. "She's perfect," I told Jacob, after her interview, my voice bright with relief. Another woman in our boys' club of programmers and sales guys felt like a victory. "She gets operations in a way we need. She'll tame the chaos." Jacob nodded, his eyes lingering on the door where Melissa had just left. "Yeah," he said, his tone oddly distant. "She's exactly what we need." He hired her the next day, and I didn't think twice about it. I was too busy debugging a new security protocol, my mind lost in lines of code that felt more like home than the house I shared with Jacob. Melissa fit in like she'd been coded for our company. Within weeks, she'd reorganized our chaotic filing system, streamlined client onboarding, and turned our disaster of a supply closet into a model of efficiency. She brought homemade cookies to meetings, remembered everyone's birthdays, and even fixed the ancient coffee machine that had been gurgling complaints for months. I thought I'd found a friend, someone who understood the pressure of being a woman in tech, someone I could trust. But trust is a fragile thing, and I was too naive to see the cracks forming. It started with small moments, ones I dismissed as quirks of a growing company. During a team meeting, I was explaining a new feature, a predictive model that could detect attack patterns with 97% accuracy when Melissa interjected her voice smooth as silk. What Brenda's saying is that we're enhancing our analytics, she said, her smile professional, but pointed. It's about making the platform more accessible to clients. I blinked, caught off guard. My explanation hadn't needed translation, but the team nodded along as if her words carried more weight. Jacob, sitting at the head of the table, said nothing, his expression unreadable. Later, I pulled him aside in the break room, the hum of the coffee machine masking our words. "Why didn't you back me up?" I asked, my voice low. She simplified it to the point of being wrong. He laughed, a sound that felt like a dismissal. "She's just trying to help Brenda. You know how technical you get. Not everyone speaks code." His hand brushed mine, a gesture that used to feel like reassurance, but now felt like a distraction. I let it go, but the unease lingered, a faint static in the back of my mind. The late nights started soon after. At first, they seemed necessary, urgent client pitches, restructuring the sales team, planning for the next quarter. Jacob and Melissa would stay behind their silhouettes, visible through the glass walls of the conference room, as I packed up to leave. "You head home," Jacob would say around 7 p.m. His tone, casual, but firm. "Melissa and I need to finish these revenue projections. Don't wait up." I'd drive to our suburban house, the one we'd bought with dreams of stability, and heat up leftover Chinese food in a kitchen that felt too big for one person. I'd fall asleep on the couch, the TV flickering with shows I didn't watch, waking to the sound of Jacob slipping into bed at 2 or 3 a.m. The faint scent of perfume clung to him, not mine, but something floral, sharp, unfamiliar. "You're imagining things," he said when I finally asked, his voice edged with irritation. "Melissa wears the same perfume as half the women in Seattle." "You're being paranoid." Paranoid? The word stuck a splinter I couldn't pull out. I started doubting myself, questioning the instincts that had always guided me through code and chaos. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the stress of scaling NextCore was twisting my perceptions. After all, Jacob loved me. We'd built this company together, hadn't we? We were partners. But the isolation grew, a slow poison seeping into my days. My team, once a tight-knit group that swapped ideas over late-night coffee, began to drift. Sarah, my lead developer, stopped joining me for our Tuesday lunches, citing deadlines with a quick apologetic smile. Marcus, who used to bounce database ideas off me, started sending formal emails with Melissa, copied as if I needed supervision. Even the administrative staff grew distant, their conversations halting when I entered the break room. The camaraderie we'd built over 3 years evaporated, leaving me a stranger in my own kingdom. I tried to confront Jacob, but he was a master of deflection. "You're projecting," he'd say, his eyes not meeting mine. "The team respects you. You're just under pressure." He'd mention a therapist. He thought I should see his tone gentle, but calculated, as if my concerns were a symptom of instability. I didn't tell him about Dr. Patricia Reeves, the therapist I'd started seeing in Tacoma, far from Seattle's tech corridor. I paid cash, used a fake last name, and poured out my fears to a stranger who handed me tissues and called it what it was: gaslighting. "You're not crazy," Dr. Reeves said. During our third session, her glasses perched low on her nose. "What you're describing is manipulation, subtle but deliberate. Trust your instincts." "But what if I'm wrong?" I asked, my voice small. "What if I'm seeing patterns where there aren't any?" She leaned forward, her gaze steady. You built a platform that predicts threats by seeing patterns no one else can. You're not imagining this. You're recognizing it. Her words were a lifeline pulling me from the fog of self-doubt. I started paying closer attention, noticing the details I'd overlooked. Melissa's hand lingering on Jacob's arm during meetings, a touch too casual to be professional. The way she positioned herself beside him, as if staking a claim. The way he'd say we when discussing decisions, but the we meant him and Melissa, not him and me. I told myself I was being ridiculous, jealous, insecure, all the things Jacob accused me of when I tried to talk about it. But deep down in that quiet place where truths hide, I knew my perfect life was unraveling. One October afternoon, I stopped by Jacob's favorite Thai place downtown, the one with the red awning and an owner who remembered our orders pad. Thai extra spicy, just how he liked it. I balanced the takeout bags in one hand, my key card in the other, and headed for his corner office. It was 2:47 p.m., a detail I remember because I checked my phone to ensure I wasn't interrupting his 3 p.m. conference call. The office was quiet, the hum of voices drifting from the conference room down the hall. Jacob's laugh, distinctive and warm, echoed faintly. Good. His meeting had moved. I pushed the door open with my hip, intending to leave the food as a surprise. But Melissa's silver laptop sat open on Jacob's desk, its screen glowing like a beacon. It was logged in her email client. Open the preview of the top message, freezing me in place. Can't wait for this weekend. The cabin is perfect for what we discussed. From Jacob's email address. My breath caught the Thai food scent, turning sour in my nose. I set the bags down, slowly, my eyes fixed on the screen. I should have closed it, walked away, left the food, and pretended I'd seen nothing. But something about that laptop in his private space, its glow demanding attention, held me there. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a heartbeat before I scrolled down. The next email's preview read, "Once Brenda's out, we can restructure everything." The world tilted a dizzying shift that left my heart pounding. I sank into Jacob's chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and started reading. Email after email, a secret correspondence stretching back 4 months. They weren't just having an affair. They were plotting a takeover my company, my platform, my life. Jacob had written 3 weeks ago, "The board trusts me completely. When I tell them Brenda's unstable, her work suffering, they'll support the termination. Her 48% ownership means nothing if she's voted out for cause." Melissa's response was a knife. "The documentation I've been creating supports that narrative. Every time she questions your decisions, I note it as aggressive behavior. Every time she works from home, it's absence without proper communication. We have enough." My hands stayed steady as I pulled out my phone, snapping photos of each damning word. 23 sharp clicks, each one a brick in the wall I was building around myself. My chest felt like it might explode, but my movements were precise, mechanical. I was a coder, after all, trained to find patterns, to solve problems, to stay calm when the system crashed. And this was a crash, the kind that rewrote everything. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. I closed the laptop carefully, exactly as I'd found it, and was unwrapping the Thai food when Jacob walked in with 2 executives, Tom and David. "Honey." His face lit up with a warmth I now saw as rehearsed. What a nice surprise. "Thought you might be hungry." I said, my voice somehow normal. "Hi, Tom. Hi, David." They exchanged pleasantries, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I played the loving wife, mentioning a debugging task as an excuse to leave. Jacob kissed my cheek, a performance for his colleagues, and I walked out my steps steady until I reached the parking garage. There beside my car, I threw up the Thai food's scent, mingling with betrayal. I leaned against the concrete pillar, its familiar crack a reminder of the fault lines in my life. That night, I lay beside Jacob as he scrolled through his phone, chuckling at something. Was it her? Planning their weekend at the cabin, I studied his profile in the blue light, this stranger wearing my husband's face. "Everything okay?" he asked without looking at me. "You were quiet at dinner, just tired." I lied. "The new protocol is complex. Maybe you should take a break," he said, his tone dripping with concern that felt like a script. "You've been pushing yourself too hard." There it was, the groundwork for my instability. I made a noncommittal sound and turned away, my mind racing. They were planning to erase me, but how much time did I have in the dark? As Jacob's breathing slowed to sleep, I opened my laptop, the glow casting my face in shadow. I wasn't coding for NextCore anymore. I was coding for me. I began documenting everything, every line of code I'd written, every innovation I'd birthed, every email where Jacob admitted he couldn't understand my work. I created encrypted folders backed up to cloud services under accounts he didn't know existed. I bought a tiny voice recorder from a spy shop downtown, paying cash, feeling like a character in a noir film. It worked. I recorded meetings where Jacob claimed my ideas as his own, his voice smooth, as he told investors I was just technical support. I recorded his lies, my silence, the team's acquiescence. The hardest part was pretending, kissing him goodbye each morning, smiling at Melissa's calculated friendliness, acting like I didn't know they were dismantling my life. Some nights, I'd lie awake until 4 a.m., my laptop warm against my thighs, writing code that wasn't for NextCore's clients, but for me. Not destruction, but protection. Tracking protocols, invisible markers that proved the platform was mine. Backdoors so subtle, they'd never be found unless I wanted them to be. Each line was a spell, a shield, a promise to myself that I wouldn't be erased. Melissa's presence grew a shadow, stretching across the office. She joined client calls that were once mine, introduced as our operations strategist. She attended my technical demos, asking questions that undermined me with a smile. When Brenda says revolutionary, she means incrementally improved. She'd clarify her tone, helpful, but cutting. She copied herself on emails to my team, scheduled one-on-ones with my developers, positioned herself as the caring leader, while I was painted as the obsessive technocrat. The isolation was a blade, slow and cruel. Sarah stopped meeting my eyes. Marcus's emails grew formal. The break room fell silent when I walked in. One afternoon, I overheard two junior developers in the supply closet, their voices low. "Is it true she had a breakdown in the parking garage?" one asked. "That's what I heard." The other replied, "Jacob's been patient, but it's affecting the company. Melissa said we need to be supportive, but keep boundaries." The situation. That's what I'd become, a problem to be managed, not the co-founder who'd built the platform they used every day. I sat in that closet, surrounded by paper and toner, the weight of their words crushing me. I'd been outmaneuvered, my trust in Jacob weaponized against me. But as I sat there, something shifted. The pain hardened into resolve, a quiet fire kindling in my chest. They thought they could rewrite my story. They didn't know I was already writing my own. The glow of Melissa's laptop lingered in my mind like a ghost. Its damning emails burned into my memory. I sat in my car in the parking garage, the Thai food containers discarded on the passenger seat. Their scent now a bitter reminder of the moment my world fractured. My hands trembled as I clutched my phone, scrolling through the photos. I'd taken 23 snapshots of betrayal, each one a piece of evidence that Jacob and Melissa were dismantling my life. The words from one email looped in my head. "Once Brenda's out, we can restructure everything." They weren't just stealing my company, they were erasing me. I drove home that October afternoon, the Seattle rain blurring the windshield like tears I refused to shed. Our house, once a symbol of shared dreams, felt like a stage set its warmth a lie. Jacob wasn't home, of course. Another late night, another meeting with Melissa, another thread in the tapestry of their deceit. I poured a glass of wine untouched and opened my laptop. The familiar hum of its fan was a comfort, a reminder that in the digital realm, I was still in control. I transferred the photos to an encrypted folder labeled simply Proof, hidden behind layers of security only I could unravel. This wasn't paranoia, it was survival. That night, as I lay beside Jacob's empty side of the bed, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. Rage was a fire, but strategy was a blade, and I'd learned from code that precision outlasts chaos. If they wanted to play this game, I'd rewrite the rules. I wasn't just Brenda Martinez, the betrayed wife and sidelined CTO. I was the architect of NextCore's soul, and I'd make sure they remembered it. The next morning, I walked into the office with a smile I'd practiced in the mirror, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder like a shield. Jacob was in his office laughing with Melissa, their voices muffled through the glass. I nodded at them as I passed, my expression serene, but inside my mind was a storm of calculations. I needed evidence not just of their affair, but of their plan to oust me, to discredit me, to steal what I'd built. I needed a fortress of proof, and I needed it fast. I started with the emails. Melissa's carelessness in leaving her laptop open was a gift, but I couldn't rely on luck again. At lunch, when the office emptied out, I slipped into Jacob's office, my heart pounding but my hands steady. His desktop was locked, but I'd written the company's security protocols myself. A custom USB drive loaded with a script I'd coded years ago for testing purposes bypassed his password in seconds. His email client opened like a confession, revealing a thread titled Board Strategy with Melissa and two board members, Tom and David. The emails were meticulous, a blueprint of betrayal. Jacob had been laying the groundwork for months, painting me as erratic, overworked, a liability. Brenda's technical skills are unmatched, he wrote in one, but her emotional stability is a concern. We need a CTO who can handle the pressure of growth. Melissa's replies were clinical, offering documentation of my supposed outbursts meetings, where I'd questioned Jacob's decisions labeled as aggression days. I'd worked from home marked as disengagement. They'd even planned to use my therapy sessions against me, though I'd never told Jacob about Dr. Reeves. How did they know I photographed every email, my phone's camera, a silent ally? Then I noticed a folder on his desktop labeled Financials Confidential. A quick scan revealed discrepancies, offshore accounts, unexplained transfers to a consulting firm with no public record. The firm's name, Horizon Ventures, rang no bells, but a single email from Melissa mentioned a bonus for their mutual friend there. My stomach twisted. Were they siphoning company funds? I copied the folder to a secure drive, my movements mechanical, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Back in my office, I locked the door and opened my own laptop. I didn't just need evidence, I needed leverage. NextCore's platform was my creation, every line of code, a piece of my soul. If they thought they could sever me from it, they'd underestimated the depth of my roots. I began weaving a new layer into the system, not a virus, not sabotage, but a shadow. A set of protocols I called Echo, invisible to anyone but me, designed to expose vulnerabilities when triggered. Echo wasn't destruction, it was revelation. A way to show the world the platform's flaws, and who could fix them. Each night while Jacob slept or stayed late with Melissa, I worked in the dark, my laptop's glow casting my face in sharp relief. Echo was my masterpiece, a symphony of code that could mimic a cyber attack, lock critical systems, and reveal the platform's weaknesses without causing permanent harm. It was my insurance policy, a way to prove that NextCore's strength depended on me. I buried it deep behind layers of encryption, its activation tied to a timer I could set from anywhere. If they pushed me out, Echo would sing and their empire would falter. But code alone wasn't enough. I needed to protect myself legally, financially, personally. I drove to Tacoma under the guise of a client meeting Dr. Reeves for an emergency session. They're planning to call me unstable. I told her my voice steady, despite the fear clawing at my chest. They know about my therapy. How she frowned, adjusting her glasses. Have you shared anything with colleagues, even casually? No one, I said. I used Cash, a fake name. You're the only one who knows. Her eyes narrowed. Then they're watching you. Brenda, be careful. Document everything and find a lawyer. Now. I found Ellen Harper, a divorce attorney with a reputation for dismantling powerful men. Her office was a small, cluttered space in Bellevue, filled with books and the faint scent of lavender. I paid in cash, using the same alias as with Dr. Reeves. I laid out everything, the emails, the financial discrepancies, the whispers about my instability. Ellen listened, her pen scratching notes, her expression unreadable. "You're not just fighting for your marriage," she said when I finished. "You're fighting for your legacy. They're trying to erase you from your own company. We'll need ironclad proof of your contributions, and we'll need to move quietly." "I'm already documenting," I said, sliding a USB drive across her desk. Every line of code I wrote, every email where Jacob admits he relies on me, every meeting where he takes credit for my work. She nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're smarter than they think. Keep it that way." Ellen advised me to gather more financial records, board meeting minutes, anything that showed Jacob and Melissa's collusion. She also suggested a forensic accountant to trace the mysterious transfers to Horizon Ventures. If they're stealing from the company, she said, that's your leverage. But don't confront them yet. Let them think they're winning. I took her advice, moving like a ghost through my own life. At the office, I played the role they'd scripted for me, dedicated but distracted, competent but not essential. I smiled at Melissa's suggestions, nodded at Jacob's interruptions, let them believe I was oblivious. But every interaction was a data point, every slight a piece of the puzzle. I recorded meetings with my hidden voice recorder, capturing Jacob's casual dismissal of my ideas, Melissa's calculated praise that always carried a sting. Brenda's so detail-oriented, she'd say her tone implying I was lost in minutiae, not steering the ship. One evening, I stayed late, claiming I was debugging a server issue. The office was empty, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant patter of rain. I accessed the company's financial database using admin privileges Jacob didn't know I still had. The records confirmed my suspicions. $200,000 had been funneled to Horizon Ventures over 6 months, disguised as consulting fees. The invoices were vague, the firm's address a P.O. box in Delaware. I copied everything, my heart racing, as I heard footsteps in the hallway. It was Melissa, her silhouette sharp against the glass walls. "Brenda," she called, her voice laced with surprise. "I thought you went home." "Server glitch," I said, closing the database and opening a random code editor. "You know how it is always something breaking." She leaned against the doorframe, her smile too perfect. "You work too hard. Jacob's worried about you." I met her gaze, my own smile a mirror of hers. "He's always worried. I'll manage." She lingered a moment longer, her eyes searching my desk, my screen, as if she could sense the secrets I was guarding. Then she left, her heels echoing like a countdown. I exhaled, my fingers trembling as I saved the financial data to my encrypted drive. Horizon Ventures was a lead, a thread I'd pull later. For now, I had enough to build my case. The isolation was suffocating, but it sharpened my focus. My team's distance, Sarah's averted eyes, Marcus's formal emails felt like a betrayal, but I didn't blame them. They'd been fed a narrative one where I was the problem, not the solution. I overheard whispers in the break room, rumors that I was burned out, that Jacob was carrying the company. Melissa's hand was in this, her charm, weaving a story that painted me as unreliable. But I wasn't powerless. I was invisible, and invisibility was a weapon. I started working from home more, claiming migraines or personal days, knowing each absence would be documented as evidence of my instability. But those days were my sanctuary. In my home office, surrounded by monitors and empty coffee cups, I built my arsenal. I refined Echo, adding layers of complexity, a fake cyber attack that would trigger alerts across the platform, exposing vulnerabilities only I could fix. I wrote scripts to monitor Jacob's and Melissa's emails using a backdoor I'd left in the company's servers years ago. Each night I read their plans, their confidence in my downfall fueling my resolve. I also began to see patterns in their behavior, like anomalies in code. Melissa's late-night visits to Jacob's office weren't just about work. They were performances staged for anyone who might be watching. But who was the audience? The board, the team, or someone else? The mention of a mutual friend at Horizon Ventures gnawed at me. I hired a private investigator, a quiet man named Victor, who operated out of a nondescript office in Renton. I gave him the financial records and the P.O. box address, paying in cash. Find out who they're paying, I said, and why. Victor's first report came a week later, emailed to an account I'd set up under a pseudonym. Horizon Ventures was a shell company, its sole employee, a lawyer named Richard Langston, who had ties to one of NextCore's board members, David. The transfers weren't just bonuses, they were bribes payments to secure David's vote to oust me. The revelation hit like a punch, but it also clarified my path. This wasn't just personal, it was a conspiracy, a calculated theft of everything I'd built. I met Ellen again, showing her Victor's report. This is enough to start, she said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of a fight. We can prove fraud breach of fiduciary duty, but we need to time it right. If you confront them too soon, they'll cover their tracks. I'm not confronting them, I said, my voice steady. I'm preparing. When they make their move, I'll be ready. She nodded, respect flickering in her gaze. You're not just fighting for your company, Brenda. You're fighting for your name. Keep building your case and don't let them see you coming. I didn't. I moved through the office like a shadow. My smiles practiced my words, careful. I let Jacob think I was crumbling, let Melissa believe her narrative was winning. But every night, I wove my web tighter. More evidence, more code, more secrets. I recorded a meeting where Jacob pitched my predictive algorithm to investors as our latest innovation, never mentioning my name. I saved emails where Melissa instructed staff to route technical questions through her cutting me out. I tracked the Horizon payments, each one a nail in their coffin. The hardest part was the loneliness. I missed my team, the late-night debugging sessions with Sarah, the whiteboard battles with Marcus. I missed Jacob, or at least the man I thought he was. But I didn't let myself break. Each line of code, each recorded lie was a step toward reclaiming my power. Echo was nearly complete, its timer set to activate when I chose. I didn't know when they'd strike, but I knew it was coming. The emails, the rumors, the financial games they were building to something, a final blow to push me out. One night, as I sat in my home office, the rain a steady drumbeat outside, I opened a new file. Not code, but a letter to myself. You are enough, I wrote. You built this. They can't take that from you. I saved it in my encrypted folder, a reminder of who I was when doubt crept in. I wasn't just fighting for NextCore. I was fighting for me, for the woman who'd turned dreams into reality, who'd seen patterns no one else could. They thought they could erase me, but I was rewriting the story. As I closed my laptop, my phone buzzed with a text from Jacob Late, meeting with Melissa. Don't wait up. I stared at the words, my heart a quiet fire. Let them meet. Let them plan. They didn't know I was ready, that I'd turn their betrayal into my strength. Echo was waiting, and so was I. The timer on my phone read 10 minutes when I stepped out of the elevator, flanked by Tony and Marcus, the security guards, who'd once shared coffee with me in the break room. Their faces were stone, their eyes fixed on the glass doors ahead, as if escorting me out of my own company was just another task. I didn't blame them. They were pawns in a game they didn't understand, caught in the narrative Jacob and Melissa had spun. My laptop bag hung heavy on my shoulder, its contents a silent rebellion against the betrayal that had just unfolded in Jacob's office. His words echoed in my mind, "You're terminated." Effective immediately. He thought he'd won, that he'd erased me with a manila envelope and a smug smile. He didn't know that in 10 minutes the empire he'd stolen would begin to unravel. The January air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside the Seattle skyline, looming gray and indifferent. I walked to my car, parked in the shadow of the NextCore building, its sleek facade a lie, hiding the chaos I'd set in motion. My phone vibrated. 9 minutes. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cold against my skin, and placed the laptop bag beside me. Inside was my old laptop, the one Jacob had mocked as sentimental, unaware it held the key to echo the shadow protocol I'd woven into NextCore's core. I didn't need to open it to know it was working. Echo was alive, counting down, ready to expose the vulnerabilities only I could see. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and let the memories flood in, not to wallow, but to ground myself. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment. 6 months of playing the oblivious wife, the sideline CTO, while I documented their lies, traced their financial schemes, and coded my retribution. Jacob and Melissa thought they'd outsmarted me, painting me as unstable, unreliable, a relic to be discarded. But I was the architect of NextCore's soul, and architects don't just build, they know how to break. The first sign came at 8 minutes. My phone buzzed with a notification from NextCore's internal monitoring system, a back door I'd left open to watch the chaos unfold. The client portal was down to error messages, flooding the dashboard, connection timed out. I could picture the office, now developers scrambling screens, flashing red, panic rippling through the open plan space. Sarah, my lead developer, would be at her desk, fingers flying over her keyboard, trying to diagnose a problem she couldn't understand. She wouldn't find it. Echo was invisible, a ghost in the machine designed to mimic a sophisticated cyber attack, without leaving a trace. I started the car but didn't drive. I wanted to be close to feel the tremor of their empire crumbling. 7 minutes. Another alert, the platform's predictive algorithms were misfiring, flagging false positives that locked users out of critical systems. Clients, banks, hospitals, tech giants would be calling their trust in NextCore, eroding with every unanswered ticket. I imagined Melissa in her red dress, her composure cracking as she realized the scope of the failure. Jacob would be in his office shouting orders, blaming everyone but himself. They'd built their throne on my work, and now they'd feel its weight. The phone buzzed again, 6 minutes. A text from Sarah Brenda. "What's happening? The system's going haywire. We need you." I stared at the words, a pang of guilt twisting in my chest. Sarah hadn't betrayed me, not really. She'd been caught in their narrative, her loyalty swayed by whispers and half-truths. I typed a reply, but didn't send it. "I'm sorry, Sarah. This is bigger than you know." I deleted it and turned off my phone's notifications except for the timer and my monitoring feed. This wasn't about hurting the team. It was about exposing the truth. 5 minutes. The alerts escalated data breaches detected in 3 regions. None real, but convincing enough to trigger panic. Echo wasn't crashing the system. It was holding a mirror to its flaws. Flaws I'd warned Jacob about years ago, when he'd dismissed my security upgrades as overkill. I'd built those upgrades anyway, hidden in plain sight, knowing one day I'd need them. Now they were my voice, shouting what I couldn't say. "You can't run this without me." I drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, a place with a view of the next core building. The barista, a young woman with a nose ring, handed me a latte. I didn't plan to drink. I sat by the window, my laptop open, connected to a secure VPN I'd set up months ago. The monitoring feed showed chaos unfolding in real-time servers, overloaded client dashboards, frozen internal communications, flooded with desperate messages. A post from the company's X account appeared a frantic attempt at damage control experiencing technical difficulties. Our team is working to resolve the issue. I smiled, a quiet thrill running through me. Their team didn't know what they were facing. Only I did. 4 minutes. My phone rang Jacob's number. I let it go to voicemail, his voice clipped and urgent. "Brenda, we're under attack. The platform's crashing. Where are you?" "Call me back." I didn't. Another call, this time from Tom, the board member I'd suspected of taking bribes from Horizon Ventures. His voicemail was panicked, his usual arrogance gone. "Brenda, we need you. Whatever's happening, you're the only one who can fix it." I saved both messages, more bricks in my fortress of evidence. The coffee shop's radio played a soft jazz tune, a surreal contrast to the storm I'd unleashed. 3 minutes. The monitoring feed showed a new alert. The platform's encryption keys were compromised. A false flag I'd coded to trigger FBI scrutiny. I'd made sure the data was safe. Echo didn't destroy, only exposed. But the appearance of a breach would bring regulators sniffing. Jacob's offshore accounts, the ones I'd traced to Horizon Ventures, would come under scrutiny. He'd thought he was untouchable, but I'd made him vulnerable. I sipped the latte, the warmth grounding me as I watched the next core building. Employees spilled out, some clutching laptops, others on phones, their faces tense. I recognized Sarah pacing by the entrance, her phone pressed to her ear. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, that this was temporary, that I wasn't the villain they'd been led to believe. But I stayed still, my role, now that of the observer, the weaver of consequences. 2 minutes. The X posts were frantic now, clients replying with fury. Unacceptable downtime. "Where's your team?" Switching to a competitor, I scrolled through the comments, each one a crack in Jacob's empire. Investors were calling, their messages flooding my encrypted inbox, forwarded from a script I'd planted in the company's servers. "What's happening, Brenda?" Why didn't Jacob warn us? They didn't know I'd been fired, that Jacob had gambled everything on Melissa's charm and his own arrogance. 1 minute. I closed my laptop, my heart steady despite the adrenaline. Echo was in its final phase, locking the platform's core functions and displaying a single message across every dashboard: system integrity compromised. Contact the architect. I was the architect, the only one who could unlock the chaos. Jacob and Melissa had built their narrative on lies, but I'd built mine on truth, every line of code, every innovation, every sleepless night. They'd tried to erase me, but I was indelible. 0. The timer hit, and my phone went silent. The monitoring feed dark. Echo had done its work, retreating into the shadows as designed. I didn't need to see the aftermath to know what was happening. The next core building was a hive of panic. Jacob shouting, Melissa scrambling the board, reeling as clients pulled contracts and stocks plummeted. I'd seen the numbers in real-time shares dropping from $47 to $12 in hours of freefall that would cost them millions. The FBI would be circling soon, tipped off by my anonymous report about Horizon Ventures sent from a burner email an hour ago. I stayed in the coffee shop, the jazz now a lullaby to my calm. My phone buzzed again. Jacob, then Melissa, then a dozen others. Voicemails piled up, each more desperate than the last. Jacob's third message was raw, his voice breaking, Brenda, please. Whatever you did, undo it. I'm begging you. I'll give you anything, shares, control, anything. Melissa's was colder, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Brenda, this is bigger than you think. Fix it, or we all go down. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. I paid for the latte, left a generous tip, and drove home, the rain a steady companion. The house was empty, Jacob's absence a relief. I opened my laptop, not to check the damage, but to write. Not code this time, but a journal entry. A record of this moment. They thought they could break me, I wrote. They forgot I built this. I am the architect. And architects don't just create, they reclaim. The calls kept coming over the next hours. Investors, clients, even Sarah, her voice thick with tears. Brenda, they're saying you did this. Is it true? Why, I didn't answer her either, not yet. She deserved the truth, but not until the dust settled. The X posts grew desperate, the company's account suspended as the backlash intensified. News articles popped up their headlines, brutal NextCore solutions, crumbles in unprecedented cyber crisis, CEO under fire as stock plummets. They didn't mention me not yet. That would come later. By evening, the financial news was grim. NextCore's valuation had tanked, losing $6 million in a day. The board called an emergency meeting, their emails begging me to join. I declined with a single line, I'm no longer with the company per Jacob's decision. Let them stew in their own failure. Let them see what happens when you betray the one who holds the keys. I poured another glass of wine at this time, drinking it. The rain had stopped the sky clearing to reveal a rare Seattle sunset, its colors bleeding across the horizon. I felt no joy, not exactly, but a quiet satisfaction, like the hum of a perfectly executed program. Echo hadn't destroyed NextCore. It had exposed its fragility, its dependence on me. Jacob and Melissa had thought they could rewrite my story, but I'd turned their script against them. As I sat on the couch, my laptop closed my phone. Silent at last, I thought of the early days, Jacob's laughter, our shared dreams, the code that had bound us. That Brenda was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who'd learned that trust is a luxury and power is a choice. I wasn't done yet. The fallout would continue, the FBI digging into Horizon Ventures, the board scrambling to save what was left. But for now, I let myself breathe the weight of 6 months lifting, if only for a moment. They'd underestimated me, and they'd paid the price. But the story wasn't over. I'd built NextCore once, and I could build again on my terms with my truth. The architect was still here, and she was just beginning. The Seattle skyline glittered beyond my new office window, a constellation of lights that felt like a promise. It was 3 weeks since Echo had sung, since NextCore's empire had crumbled under the weight of its own lies. I sat at a sleek desk in a rented co-working space downtown, my laptop open to a spreadsheet tracking my new Venture Secure Guard solutions. The name felt right. A nod to the shields I'd woven in code and in spirit, a declaration that I'd never be erased again. My phone was silent now, the desperate voicemails from Jacob, Melissa, and the board a fading echo. I let the world think I'd vanished, but I was only beginning. The fallout from that day was seismic. NextCore's stock hadn't recovered, hovering at $14 after plummeting from $47. Clients had fled, their trust shattered by the platform's sudden vulnerabilities. The FBI was circling their investigation into Horizon Ventures, uncovering a web of shell companies tied to board member David, just as my private investigator Victor had predicted. Jacob's name was splashed across tech blogs, his golden boy image tarnished by headlines like NextCore CEO faces fraud allegations as company collapses. Melissa had gone quiet. Her LinkedIn profile, dormant her red dresses and calculated smiles, nowhere to be seen. I hadn't planned to revel in their downfall, but I couldn't deny the quiet satisfaction that warmed me each morning. I'd spent those first weeks after Echo rebuilding not just my career, but myself. Secure Guard was born in a flurry of late nights, my fingers dancing across the keyboard as I crafted a new cybersecurity platform, leaner and sharper than NextCore's. I'd taken a contract with Pacific Financial, a former NextCore client spooked by the breach. They'd begged me to consult, offering a six-figure fee to secure their systems. I delivered in 10 days, my algorithms locking their data tighter than a vault. Word spread, and my inbox filled with offers startups, banks, even a government agency. Brenda Martinez, the forgotten CTO, was suddenly a name whispered with reverence. But the whispers weren't just about my skills. The tech world buzzed with rumors about NextCore's collapse theories, ranging from a Russian hack to an inside job. Some posts on X hinted at a ghost architect, a shadowy figure who'd exposed the company's flaws. I read them from my co-working space, a faint smile tugging at my lips. They weren't wrong, but they'd never know the full story. I'd made sure of that, my tracks covered by layers of encryption and misdirection. Echo was my secret, a spellcast, and then dissolved, leaving no trace but its impact. I leaned back in my chair, the city's lights reflecting in my coffee mug. Secure Guard was thriving, but a part of me still felt tethered to NextCore. Not to Jacob, not to the betrayal, but to the platform I'd built. It was my creation, every line of code a piece of my soul. I'd walked away to prove a point, but could I let it die? The question lingered unanswered until my phone buzzed with a new email. From Jacob. Subject, please, Brenda. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. I hadn't spoken to him since the day he fired me, since his voicemails had begged for salvation. I opened the email expecting desperation, but his tone was different, measured, almost respectful. The board is in chaos. Clients are gone. The FBI is digging into David's accounts. I know I screwed up, Brenda. I know I betrayed you. But NextCore is dying, and you're the only one who can save it. Meet me. I'm offering 48% of the company and full technical control. Name your terms. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. Jacob's offer was a trap, or at least it could be. He'd manipulated me before used my trust against me. But the numbers didn't lie. NextCore was on its knees, and I held the only key to its revival. I thought of Sarah, of Marcus, of the team who'd been caught in the crossfire. I thought of the platform. My platform languishing under Jacob's mismanagement. Could I walk away and let it die, or could I reclaim it on my terms? I met Jacob 2 days later at a quiet diner in Capitol Hill, a neutral ground far from NextCore's glass and steel facade. He looked older, his jaw shadowed with stubble, his eyes hollow with sleepless nights. The man who'd once charmed investors with a smile was gone, replaced by someone grasping at straws. I wore a simple black blazer, my hair pulled back, my expression unreadable. The laptop bag sat at my feet, a silent reminder of the power I held. Brenda. He started, his voice low. I'm sorry. I was wrong. About everything. I raised an eyebrow, sipping my coffee. You fired me, Jacob. You tried to erase me. Apologies don't undo that. He flinched his hands, twisting around his mug. I know. Melissa, she pushed me, fed me ideas about growth, about control. I thought I could handle it without you. I was wrong. I leaned forward, my voice cold. You didn't just sideline me, Jacob. You and Melissa planned to call me unstable, to steal my shares, to funnel money to a shell company. I have proof, emails, recordings, financial records. The FBI has some of it too. His face paled, his eyes darting to the door, as if expecting agents to burst in. You did this, didn't you? The crash, the breach. I smiled, a shadow of the one I'd given him the day he fired me. You did this, Jacob. You built an empire on lies. I just showed the world what it was made of. He swallowed, his voice barely a whisper. What do you want? Name it. I leaned back, studying him. This was the moment I'd prepared for, the moment I'd coded and documented and fought for. 48% of NextCore, I said. Full control of the technical division. You step back as CEO, take an advisory role. The board answers to me on all tech decisions. And Melissa's gone. No severance, no references. He nodded too quickly, like a man drowning. Done. Anything else? One more thing I said, my voice steady. You never speak my name in public again, unless it's to credit me as the architect of NextCore. I'm not your wife anymore, Jacob. I'm not your partner. I'm your reckoning. He stared at me, the weight of my words settling like dust. Okay, he said finally. Come back. Fix it. It's yours. I didn't agree immediately. I let him sweat for 2 days, consulting Ellen, my lawyer, to draft an ironclad contract. She grinned as she read Jacob's email. He's desperate, she said. You've got him cornered. This contract will lock in your control and protect your shares. He can't touch you. I signed the papers, but I didn't return to NextCore right away. I took a week working from my co-working space, letting SecureGuard grow while I planned my re-entry. The tech world was watching X posts speculating about my next move. Brenda Martinez spotted consulting for Pacific Financial. Is she done with NextCore? I didn't respond. Let them wonder. Mystery was my ally now. When I walked back into NextCore, it was on my terms. The glass doors parted, and the office fell silent, eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. Sarah rushed to me, her voice trembling. Brenda, you're back. They said you caused it, but I didn't believe them. I squeezed her hand, my smile genuine. It's okay, Sarah. I'm here to fix it. Jacob was in his office. His presence diminished a shadow of the man who'd fired me. Melissa was gone. Her desk cleared, her name erased from the company directory. I didn't ask where she'd gone. It didn't matter. I took over the technical division, my office now a command center, where I worked with Sarah and Marcus to undo Echo's chaos. It wasn't simple. Echo had been designed to expose, not destroy, but I knew every line, every vulnerability. I closed the back doors, patched the flaws, and rebuilt the platform stronger than before. Clients trickled back their trust restored by my name. Pacific Financial sent a glowing testimonial, and others followed. The board, chastened by the FBI's investigation and David's resignation, deferred to me, their questions timid. Jacob stayed out of my way, his advisory role a formality. I didn't gloat, didn't need to. The platform spoke for me, its strength a testament to my work. SecureGuard continued to grow a side project that became my sanctuary. I hired 2 developers, both women, and we worked out of the co-working space building, something new, something mine. NextCore was my past, but SecureGuard was my future, a company where no one could silence me, where my name was the cornerstone. One evening, as I left the NextCore office, Sarah caught up with me. Why did you come back? She asked, her eyes searching mine. After everything they did, I looked at the building, its lights reflecting the city's pulse. Because it's mine, I said simply. Not Jacob's, not Melissa's. I built it, and I wasn't done with it. She nodded, a spark of admiration in her gaze. You're kind of a legend, you know. The ghost architect. I laughed the soundlight free. Let them call me that, as long as they know I'm here. I drove home the rain, a familiar companion, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. The house was mine now. Jacob's belongings gone, the divorce papers signed. I poured a glass of wine, sat on the balcony, and watched the city breathe. SecureGuard was thriving. NextCore was healing. And I was whole. The architect had returned not to rebuild their empire, but to claim her own. The NextCore office glowed under the soft light of a rare Seattle sunset, its glass walls reflecting the city's pulse like a heartbeat. I stood at the head of the conference room, my laptop opened its screen displaying the restored platform, my platform now stronger than ever. The team sat around the polished table, their faces a mix of awe and relief. Sarah's eyes shone with pride. Marcus nodded as I explained the new security protocols, and even the junior developers, once swayed by whispers, leaned forward, hanging on my every word. 6 months had passed since Echo's reckoning, since I'd walked back into this building and reclaimed what was mine. Tonight was the company's relaunch gala, a celebration of NextCore's recovery, and I was its undisputed architect. The room felt different now, no longer a cage, but a canvas. I'd rebuilt the platform from the ashes of Jacob's failure, closing Echo's back doors, and weaving new algorithms that made NextCore untouchable. Clients had returned their trust restored by my name alone. Pacific Financial's CEO had called me personally, his voice thick with gratitude. "You saved us, Brenda. We're doubling our contract." The stock had climbed to $52, surpassing its pre-crisis peak, and tech blogs hailed NextCore's comeback as a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. It was me, every line of code, every sleepless night, every choice to fight instead of break. I glanced at the empty chair where Jacob used to sit. He was here tonight relegated to an advisory role, his presence a formality I tolerated for the board's sake. He'd aged a decade in 6 months, his charisma dulled by the weight of his mistakes. The FBI's investigation into Horizon Ventures had forced David's resignation, and whispers of fraud clung to Jacob like smoke. He'd signed my contract, 48% ownership, full technical control, Melissa's termination, without a fight, his signature, a surrender. I didn't gloat, didn't need to. My work spoke louder than his lies ever could. As I closed my presentation, the room erupted in applause. Sarah stood clapping hardest, her smile a bridge to the days when we'd debugged together until dawn. "You're incredible, Brenda," she said later as we sipped champagne at the gala. "They tried to bury you, but you rose." I smiled, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. They didn't know I was the foundation. The gala was a spectacle caterer's, weaving through the crowd string lights draped across the office, a jazz quartet playing in the corner. Investors mingled with clients, their laughter a stark contrast to the panic that had gripped this place 6 months ago. I wore a deep emerald dress, chosen not for flash, but for power its color, a nod to the green glow of my coding screen. My laptop bag sat in my office, no longer a weapon but a relic, a reminder of the day I'd turned betrayal into triumph. Jacob approached me near the dessert table, his suit impeccable but his eyes weary. "Brenda," he said, his voice low, "can we talk?" "Privately." I nodded, leading him to my office. The glass walls, now a symbol of transparency, I controlled. He closed the door, the music muffled, and faced me. For a moment, I saw the man I'd married, the one who'd paced our tiny apartment, dreaming of empires. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who'd gambled and lost. "I was wrong," he said, his voice raw. "About you, about Melissa, about everything. I let her convince me you were holding us back. I let my ego blind me to what you built. NextCore is yours, Brenda. It always was." I studied him, my expression unreadable. His words were sincere, but sincerity was cheap after what he'd done. "You didn't just betray me, Jacob," I said, my voice steady. "You betrayed the dream we shared. You tried to erase me, to steal my work, to rewrite my story. You don't get to apologize and make it right." He flinched, his hands clenching. "I know, but I'm trying." I stepped back. "Gave you control. I'm not fighting you anymore." "You're not fighting because you can't." I said, my tone sharp but calm. "You lost the moment you thought you could run this without me." "You're here because I allow it, Jacob. Remember that." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "The board wants to honor you tonight. A public statement crediting you as the architect. I wrote it myself. It's the least I can do." I didn't respond, just held his gaze until he looked away. He left the office, rejoining the gala, his shadow smaller than I remembered. I stayed behind, closing the door, needing a moment to breathe. The city sparkled beyond the window, its lights a map of possibilities. I thought of the girl who'd coded in a cramped apartment, who'd believed in love and partnership, who'd nearly been broken by betrayal. That girl was still in me, but she'd grown into someone new, someone who didn't need validation, only truth. The gala's centerpiece was the board's announcement delivered by Tom, the remaining senior member. He stood on a makeshift stage, his voice carrying over the crowd. NextCore's recovery is a testament to one person he said his eyes finding mine. Brenda Martinez, our CTO and co-founder, the architect of our platform. Without her, we'd be nothing. Tonight, we honor her as the heart of NextCore. The applause was deafening, cameras flashing. As I stepped forward, my smile composed but genuine. I didn't speak, didn't need to. The platform running flawlessly on every screen in the room was my voice. It showed real-time threat predictions, a dance of data that only I could choreograph. The crowd saw it, felt it, and knew who I was. The ghost architect was no longer a rumor. She was real, standing before them, undeniable. After the gala, I declined the flood of interview requests. Tech journalists wanted the story, the crash, the comeback, the truth behind the cyber attack. I gave them nothing. My story wasn't for sale, wasn't a spectacle for clicks and headlines. It was mine, written in code, and courage, shared only with those who'd earned it, like Sarah, like Ellen, like Dr. Reeves. The world could speculate, could call me a legend or a phantom. I didn't care. I knew who I was. I drove home, the rain a soft whisper against my windshield. The house was mine now, redecorated with clean lines and warm colors, a space that reflected me, not us. I poured a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony, the city stretching out below. Secure Guard Solutions was growing my small team of developers, already outpacing competitors. NextCore was mine again, not just in shares, but in spirit, its future shaped by my hands. Jacob was a footnote. Melissa, a shadow their betrayal, a lesson that had forged me stronger. I thought of the letter I'd written to myself 6 months ago, saved in my encrypted folder. You are enough. I didn't need to read it. Now I felt it in every breath, every choice, every line of code. I'd faced the storm and emerged not just whole, but radiant, a woman who'd turned betrayal into power loss, into legacy. The tech world whispered my name, but I didn't need their whispers. I had my own voice, and it was enough. As the city lights danced, I raised my glass to the sky, a silent toast to the architect, the survivor, the woman who'd rewritten her own story. The rain stopped, the stars peeking through, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The battle was over, and I had won not just NextCore, not just my name, but myself.